Good morning. Thank you for having me on this PIOJ's Economic Forum. It's an honor. My name is Mark Tracey. It's an honor to be involved in this forum. Let me also say it's an honor to be alongside Dan Edwards from JAMPRO. So Dan, thank you for allowing me to be alongside you. And what I will do today is I will be looking on diversification of Jamaica's economy, some emphasis being placed on the MSME sector and how they will help in regards to the diversification of the Jamaican economy. Let me bring up my presentation. So as I said earlier, my presentation will be on MSME's role in supporting the diversification of Jamaica's economy, the opportunities to pivot during and after COVID-19 pandemic, and I look at practical solutions around this. Now, in terms of the outline for my presentation, I will first begin with giving some definitions around diversification and pivoting. I will then take a look at the economic stance, where we were before COVID-19, where we are during COVID-19, and of course, in terms of looking on the shape of diversification, where do we need to be? So with that said, let us begin. Definition: economic diversification and pivoting. So in terms of economic diversification, this ultimately can be defined as a shift towards a more varied structure of domestic production and trade with a view to increase productivity, creating jobs and providing the base for sustainable poverty-reducing growth. When looking at diversification, we can break it down in terms of two pockets: domestic production diversification and trade diversification. Under the domestic production diversification, this is a result of the shift in domestic output across sectors, industries, and of course, firms. Trade diversification can occur in three ways. There can be export diversification into new products. There can be export diversification where you have existing products entering new markets. And lastly, the qualitative upgrading of export products so that there are more quality-based products entering the various markets. In relation to pivoting, this fundamentally means the changing the outturn or the direction of a business from one particular product to another, as well as services, as well as improving the dynamics in the way in which we produce. Now, given that context, I will now want to take us on a journey in regards to what happened during the COVID pandemic, as well as where we were before the pandemic landed on our shores. Now, in terms of where we were, Jamaica was on a modest growth projection, where we saw us coming out of an IMF agreement in a more robust way. We were seeing the green shoots of economic growth. And actually, what we saw was, of course, one of the best economic outturns when you look across all the various variables. Of course, with the impact of the COVID pandemic globally, there was a downturn in terms of economic activity, and Jamaica was not spared. We are now on a trajectory where we are looking on a post-COVID level of improvement, which will carry us into 2023, 2024. With that said, the dynamics of how COVID impacted our economy can be seen by getting an understanding of our overall sector outturn. In the table I'm showing you here, we're looking on the goods producing industry and the services industry. Between 2016 to 2020, we saw where the lion's share of our output was more focused in the service industry. And this has traditionally been the outturn for Jamaica over the years. With, of course, under the service industry, a great emphasis is placed on wholesale and retail trade, repair and installation, and machinery sector. We must also highlight the impact of tourism and how that improves our stay in terms of our service industry. Now, in regards to the Caribbean overall, we fundamentally know that for the Caribbean basin, tourism is a huge product. And for Jamaica, it is one of the drivers in terms of foreign exchange into our coffers. Now, with the impact of COVID, the MSME space will be impacted by 19.7% in terms of reduction in our output for the, as I said, the fiscal year 2020 to 2021. Now, with that particular outturn, we turn our attention to the fact that there is a lack of diversification across the Jamaican economy. And this is one of the things that we recognize, as a result of the pandemic. The pandemic has caused a shifting in terms of what, as economists, we look on to ensure that we have sustainability. And for Jamaica, one of the issues that we face is a lack of export diversification across the basket, as seen here by this particular table. In terms of the tourism, we saw where tourism globally and within the Caribbean relatively went flat. And we're projecting that between December 2021 onwards, there will be somewhat of a modest improvement in that particular area. But ultimately, those economies that were reliant on tourism and other service areas of the economy would have seen a dramatic fallout. Of course, in this table, I'm looking on where the areas that would have a large dependency on tourism were the ones dramatically impacted by COVID, because of COVID, there was a shutdown of all borders for a particular period of time. And coming out of the pandemic, we will see a slow improvement in the tourism product. Ultimately, we see where the tourism-dependent economies will see a less robust growth in the short and medium term. And Jamaica, of course, is one of them. Now, in terms of the support that is needed, we find that a lot of the businesses in the economy would have been impacted. Some would have closed because of demand destructions. Some would have slowed down because there was a slowdown in terms of demand for both goods and services. And also, you will find some that would have pivoted, gone into new channels of production in order to remain sustainable. So you have those that are in the no man's land, those that are positioned to not see any form of improvement within the next 3 years. These areas include the tourism and hospitality, entertainment, retail, restaurants, and agriculture. Without immediate assistance, a lot more businesses may find themselves having to close their doors. And as a result of that, there is a need to come up with programs that will help to sustainably create more room and dynamics within the economy. But ultimately, the long-term fix to improve Jamaica is for the diversification of our economy into one where you have a lot more areas, and as a result of that, reduce the risk if there is a future crisis. Now, in terms of the shape of diversification, where are we going? We know where we are coming from. We have an understanding in regards to how the pandemic would have impacted our economy and our country. And ultimately, we now need to have an understanding of where we need to go as a country in order to ensure that we are more diversified and better able to withstand shocks. Now, in regards to identifying where we start, we first have to have a long-term perspective on where the world is going in terms of economic growth. Understanding the various channels for growth globally will help us to understand where we need to go as a country in investing in various sectors so that we are more competitive and we are better able to provide goods and services for these upcoming new areas and growth sectors. So the first format in terms of diversification is for us to diversify and target specific growth sectors. Of course, I would have highlighted 3 here, which speaks to the global digital services, which has now become the next best thing given the pandemic, because what we saw in the pandemic was a scenario where bodies were unable to move. And as a result of that, there was a huge reliance on digital services, whether it is from the entertainment space, live streaming, whether it is from the business standpoint, where a lot of meetings and ongoing interaction between employees and business owners was being done through the digital platform. Agribusiness is one of the other leading growth sectors that we need to take a special look on. And I believe a lot of it has to do with incorporating the digital aspects as well as incorporating more robust and efficient procedures within agro business. And of course, manufacturing. Us having an understanding of where the manufacturing space is going globally will allow us to diversify across and within the manufacturing space to ensure that we are on the cutting edge of growth, and we as a country will be better able to ride the wave of economic and global growth so that we can see a more robust economic outturn within the medium to long term. We also need to reinforce the areas where we have a comparative advantage and pivot where necessary. So within the entertainment, tourism, and agriculture space, we know in the Caribbean basin, Jamaica is the most influential brand. And that is one of the channels that we need to reinforce in our quest to diversify. So within the tourism space, for example, given the pandemic, we would have seen where there was a shift from the more traditional resort type stays to villas and Airbnb. So I think within the space, there needs to be a pivot in terms of tourism to areas where we have build outs in terms of villas and Airbnb, where persons have that more private setting. In terms of the entertainment space, globally we saw where a lot of live stream events was on the front burner because, of course, with the pandemic, there was no mass gathering. So a lot of the work in terms of building out and pivoting will rest on the entertainment space, embracing the digital mediums by which they can still provide this particular service to both Jamaicans as well as the world. In terms of agriculture, a lot more emphasis will be needs to be placed on ensuring that we synchronize the business around agriculture and also setting the farmers within our framework where they embrace more IT-related infrastructure that will help in terms of them being more efficient in executing their production of foods for the economy and, of course, for exporting. There is need to reshape as well the infrastructure to accommodate diversification into new products and markets. So one aspect in terms of reshaping has to do with the channeling of the workforce into new areas. And of course, this has to do also with, and it's ultimately contingent on us building out our human capital to ensure that we can steadily shift our workforce between various sectors as we see trends in the world market move from one particular good to another, as well as services. Also, there's a need to accelerate the digital society. What I speak of here is ultimately looking how best we can build out the backbone, the IT backbone of the country, so that we can help this diversification thrust that is heavily contingent on us having a very robust digital landscape. And ultimately, the fourth tick for me in terms of looking on diversification and ensuring that we diversify our economy is to increase productivity, making strategic investments and improving the access to finance. Now, in terms of improving access to finance, this ultimately will allow for more players to be better equipped and be able to pivot as well as diversify within an economy that is fully looking on diversification as a national priority. And of course, the implementation of more efficient mechanisms and procedures will ultimately help us in channeling throughout the various sectors that we weren't traditionally in, but ultimately will make us very competitive on the global scene. Now, in terms of drilling down into the build out of the digital society, there are two fundamental points to this. One is on the supply side and the other is on the demand side. So in terms of the supply side, we want to ensure that there are three components that are looked on. One is the development of an infrastructure and the expansion of coverage. And you're talking about broadband, spectrum management, data centers, cloud build-outs, as well as other areas that will help to ensure that the infrastructure around our IT build-out is rigid and very sound. Also, on the supply side, the digitization and development of services. There are a number of initiatives that the government would have embarked on, for example, the whole program, as well as the digitization of operations that will seek to remove the cumbersome nature within which businesses operate in Jamaica, where there's a lot of paper pushing, to one that a lot of the information and data that is needed can be captured digitally, so that there's a move where whenever data is needed, there is a quick click of a button and that data can be pulled on, which ultimately will help in terms of the government as well as businesses being able to quickly make assessments and make decisions on the channels for them to execute on overall productivity. And lastly, on the supply side is a solution-oriented competitive environment, where we look on building out the telecommunications infrastructure so that there are various solutions and platforms available for both the government, small businesses, as well as medium-sized and large businesses to pull on in order to carry out more efficient procedures and the build-out of goods and services. On the demand side, in terms of that social, that digital landscape, we are looking on the access to devices, the uptake of technology. So one aspect is getting in the latest devices within the space, as well as the embracing of technology. And this starts with e-learning, for example, within high schools, ensuring that more students, both in the primary as well as the secondary institutions, have more access to learning about technology and ultimately being able to comfortably navigate the various devices that are now available. Under the demand again, transition and the enhancement of ICT in the commercial space. Again, when I look on small businesses, a lot of small businesses, there's need for the robust build out of IT solutions in terms of how they operate. And I think this in itself will improve the the productivity of our various businesses as well as the public sector in a meaningful way. And of course, the adoption of critical e-services. You're talking about the build out of platforms within the government, as well as the creation of small smart cities that will help us to pull data at any point in time in a central space. Now, with the build out of that digital society, that creates a room for us to be able to quickly pivot and diversify into new markets where we see the trend globally is one where the build out of the economies in terms of the first world economies have now moved to that digital platform. And with the build out of our digital society, we can quickly plug into those opportunities and not be left at the back of the race. In terms of fostering a faster diversification of our economy, there's a need for financial inclusion. And this is paramount, I believe, because one, it improves the financial access and usage in order for small businesses, for example, to better equip their entities with the latest electronic instruments in order to plug into the new phase that we're in terms of that digital platform globally that is growing. It creates financial resilience as well as it improves the growth of MSMEs in order for them to pivot and quickly grow as we build out a more resilient economy. And of course, it helps businesses to streamline and become more responsible in terms of their execution going forward. Now, in terms of ensuring that diversification grows across the spectrum, we have to look on the various fields that are now top of mind globally and ensure that, one, we identify where we have the comparative advantage, but at the same time, grow in these new areas. And this growth can only be facilitated by improvement in regards to financial inclusion, which ultimately feeds back into investments and the growth in investments. Now, one of the things I'll highlight is the orange economy. And when we speak of the orange economy in terms of diversification, we're looking on the cultural, the entertainment space, we're looking on the digital space that is ripe for growth. Internationally, we see where the digital landscape is growing. Culture is one of the things that is now embedded in the tourism cell by a lot of countries, and none more powerful than the trademark Jamaica, where our entertainment, our culture is one of the most dynamic, one of the most sought after products that is on the market. And if there's more investment and a diversification into fields along the spectrum, I do believe Jamaica will be well on its way in terms of creating a more robust infrastructure and ultimately a more robust economy. Of course, there's the investment in renewable energy, business process outsourcing, logistics. That's very huge for Jamaica, given the proximity of Jamaica in the global space. I think this is one of the areas that we need to ensure that we have a keen look on and ensure that we create the atmosphere so that we can embrace that comparative advantage that we have in terms of the logistics chain. Agro-processing is another area that we need to pay keen, close attention to. And of course, mining. Limestone is one of the minerals that I do believe has tremendous value. And of course, Jamaica is 97% limestone. And there's a huge potential in this particular market that I think we need to take a very serious look at. And one of the things that I was looking on recently speaks to a lot of the mining that is taking place globally around limestone. And a lot of it captures the digital build-out in terms of their day-to-day procedures. Now, ultimately, true diversification will see fruits in the medium to long term. The Jamaican economy must reshape structurally to create a level of resilience and create a robust economy and create robust economic growth. Some institutions may only have one large role to play, while others may have multiple. Looking on the MSME space, understanding the trajectory of MSMEs in terms of economic build-out speaks to the fact that the MSME space is the backbone of any economy. And in regards to formalizing this space as much as possible and ensuring that we diversify and digitize this space will help in terms of building a more resilient economy. It is important for us to identify exactly the responsibilities of each institution, stakeholder, and the time period over which they can be expected to fulfill their duties. Now, in terms of conclusion, diversification is a must for the robust growth and resilience in the Jamaican economy. And I will leave with 5 points coming out of this presentation. Diversification is needed to improve the Jamaican economy and reduce the risk of deep downturn in the moments of crisis. Investing in human capital is necessary as we look to diversify our economy. The MSME space formalization is also a key driver to this process. Improving our digital infrastructure will help to foster a more robust diversification of our economy. And financial inclusion, lastly, is a key ingredient to empowering the MSMEs as well as the overall economic space in the thrust towards diversification. Now, with that said, I thank you for the time, and I now open the floor for questions and answers. Thank you.